Turkey tetrazzini is one of those dishes that my mom always made after Thanksgiving to use up leftover turkey. But truth be told, it can be made any time of the year. You can use turkey, chicken, or even seafood. This is one of those dishes that can be made tons of different ways. I'm going to show you how I make it using the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today we're gonna make turkey tetrazzini because guess what? I have leftover turkey. However, this recipe is so easy to make. You can make it with chicken or you can make it with seafood. So it's super easy. I'm gonna use the Ninja Foodi 6.5 quart to make this recipe, but you could use any size pressure cooker that you like, or you can adapt it to make it on the stove and in the oven, which I will go over all of those written instructions on my website, thesaltedpepper.com. The first thing we need to do is make a roux. And I don't want that to intimidate or scare anyone because it's super easy to make. I'm gonna make it right in the Ninja Foodi, but you could do it on a little pan on the stove just as easily. All right, the first thing you wanna do is turn the Ninja Foodi on, hit the sear saute. I'm gonna start off on high, but I will be taking that heat down to medium. Throw in 2 tablespoons of butter and let that melt. Now, a roux is equal parts of flour and a fat. I'm using butter in this instance, but you could use olive oil, you could use bacon grease, you can use any type of fat that you want in this dish. But I'm just gonna stick with butter here, and 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of flour. We let this melt. I usually do that over high heat just because I'm impatient. And then I will add the flour in and reduce the heat to medium and cook it for about 2 to 3 minutes. For this recipe, we want a light roux, a blonde roux, so we don't have to cook it that long. If you're making something like a gumbo, you usually start out with a roux and you cook it for a really long time so it becomes really, really dark. But we don't need to do that, so this is pretty quick and easy. All right, that looks good. My butter is melted, so now I'm just gonna dump in the 2 tablespoons of flour, reduce my heat to medium, and just combine this flour with the butter. And it forms like a loose paste, and that's what you want. And it's a light blonde tan in color. Now this is a thickening agent, okay? So I will be removing it before we go into pressure cooking, just to be sure that we don't run into any problems pressure cooking. I thought this through quite a bit. I've always removed it during my test recipes. I thought about testing the envelope, so to speak, in the video and leaving it in because I feel like we're gonna have enough thin liquid to make it work, but it's a little risky, so I think I'm just gonna leave it alone and take it out instead of leaving it in during pressure cooking. All right, about another minute or so, and then I'm just gonna scoop it out into this bowl and we will set it to the side because you don't add it back in until after the pressure cook is up. All right, there we go. So now I'll set this to the side here and we're gonna add in 2 tablespoons of butter and we're gonna get our vegetables sauteing. For this recipe, I'm using 1 medium-sized onion, which looks like it turned out to be about 3/4 of a cup after I diced it up. I wasn't really particular. These are pretty large dices. It doesn't really matter in this kind of a recipe. You can make them as small or as big as you like. The most important thing is to make them uniform so that they all cook at the same time. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in there, and we gotta turn our heat back on. So go back to the sear saute. High is fine for this. And then I'm also gonna put in the mushrooms. Now this is 16 ounces of mushrooms sliced. I'm using baby portobello, but you could use white button, that would be perfectly fine. This is a mushroom type of recipe, but you know what? If you don't like mushrooms, leave them out. It's perfectly fine. Now, usually, I will say don't crowd your mushrooms and make sure that you, put them in a single layer. But we're gonna pressure cook these, so it's really not gonna matter. We're gonna get a little bit of flavor on by sauteing, but mostly the flavor is going to be absorbed through the broth and the wine that I'm gonna use. All right, so just mix that around, and we're gonna put in some seasonings. I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of fine grind sea salt and 1 teaspoon of black pepper. Go ahead and put those in right now. And I'm gonna use 1 bulb of garlic, but I'm gonna leave the cloves whole, okay? So I'm not going to mince them up, which would be very overpowering in this recipe. If you wanted to use minced garlic instead, just use maybe a teaspoon or 2 of minced garlic and it would be fine. Just gonna keep moving these around a little bit. All right, so to easily peel and smash your garlic cloves, just take a sharp knife and cut the top off. That one already unpeeled itself. And then I just take a knife and just kind of smash it a little bit and throw it in. Now for these other ones here that didn't peel themselves, what I do is take the root end off, leave the peels on, okay? Smash them, and then they just sort of unpeel themselves. So it makes it a lot easier than having to sit here and peel each one. You could also use a bulb or 2 of roasted garlic in this recipe. That would be amazing as well. Now, one thing about any kind of tetrazzini, whether you're making it with leftover turkey, chicken, or anything like that, is there's so many different ways you can make it. There really are no rules. Like, I was talking to my mom because this is a dish that she used to make all the time. And I asked her, I said, do you put cream cheese in yours? And she said, no, I never have. But I asked my sister, do you put cream cheese in yours? And she says, yes, I do. Well, I didn't put cream cheese in mine, but you can certainly put cream cheese in yours. No problems there at all. And then as far as the cheeses go, you can put any type of cheeses that you want. My mom said it's very important that you put Parmesan cheese in there, but after that, you can add whatever else you want. So she would just use whatever she had on hand, you know? All right, so that was about 10 cloves of whole garlic. Oh, this is already smelling so good. Now you could add some thyme in there if you wanted. I mean, there's just so many things you can do. If you want a little bit of spice, add in some red pepper flakes. I think that would be delicious. I really debated using that in this recipe, but ended up just, not going with that. All right, so that looks really good. That's all we need to do. Now, because I'm sauteing, I'm gonna deglaze the pot. I'm gonna do that with 1/2 cup of white wine. Now, if you don't like wine or can't have wine or any alcohol, don't use this. Use 1/2 cup of either turkey stock or chicken stock. But I'm gonna deglaze with the white wine just to bring in some additional flavor here. And I'm gonna let that saute just for a few minutes. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're gonna get to putting in the rest of our ingredients. Now this is a 1-pot turkey tetrazzini, so I'm gonna add in the pasta, the turkey, and some more chicken stock to go under pressure, and then we will build that cream sauce at the end. You don't wanna add in your cheeses right now, unless you're using cream cheese. You can add that in on the top. It's just gonna look horrible when you open up the lid, but it will blend back in, so don't worry about that. But I'm not using cream cheese, and I'm not gonna put in my shredded cheese until the end. All right. Looks good and it smells good. Now, one other thing that I like to add, this is not traditional, but again, turkey tetrazzini, there is really no one way or one right way to make it. I add in a slice of thick cut bacon to give a little bit of bacon flavor. I think turkey and bacon go amazing together, and this is just a great little addition. I leave it whole because I do remove it at the end. I'm not a fan of soft bacon in dishes, so I just want this in there for some flavor. Totally optional though. All right, that looks good. Now we're gonna get to layering our pasta. Now again, the pasta's up to you too. You can use so many different things. My mom used to make it with spaghetti noodles. Some people make it with linguine. I'm making it with fettuccine. Some people make it with egg noodles. Egg noodles will change the cook time a little bit, and I'll go over that in the written post. For the fettuccine, I went with a 3-minute pressure cook and a 3-minute natural release. Now, when you're done doing that, if you follow this recipe, you're gonna think your noodles are undercooked. But what I found is during the addition of the cheese and the simmering that you do and then baking the topping on top, they cook perfectly, okay? So if you like al dente noodles, definitely go with 3 minutes. If you want your noodles a little bit on the softer side, then I would go 4 or 5 minutes. All right, take your noodles, break them in half. And then after you break your noodles in half, you're gonna go across the top one direction and then go across in the other direction. You're gonna repeat that for the entire pound of noodles. I'm making a full pound of noodles. I don't usually do that in recipes. Usually I go with 8 ounces. However, a lot of people say, hey, can you double the recipe? And I thought, well, this time I'll just start out with a full pound. For those people who have large families, this will make 12 1-cup servings, so it's really quite a bit of food. You can easily cut it in half. The only thing you need to do is increase your pressure cook time, which I know sounds a little odd, right? Increase your pressure cook time to about 4 to 5 minutes if you're doing half, because you're gonna half your liquids. So your time to pressure is going to be a lot quicker, and you need these fettuccine noodles to cook all the way through, and they're thicker than spaghetti. If I was doing spaghetti, I would probably go with a 2 to 3 minute pressure cook time. If I was doing thin spaghetti, I would go with a 1-minute pressure cook. I don't recommend angel hair for this recipe just because it's a hearty recipe, and you really want a noodle that's going to hold the sauce, which is why I chose fettuccine, because it's a nice creamy sauce, and these bigger, thicker noodles really hold on to it just wonderfully. All right, so now the noodles are in, they're crisscrossed. I'm gonna put in 3 cups of chicken stock. You could absolutely use turkey stock, okay? And then on top of that, I'm gonna add in the turkey. Now, my noodles are not totally submerged, but they're submerged enough. And as they cook, they'll drop down. And then on top of that, I'm gonna add in my turkey, which is about 20 ounces. It was 4 cups cubed. And now it's time to pressure cook. So make sure the valve on the back is to the seal position. We're gonna go to the pressure cook setting, and our time is 3 minutes, and hit start. Now, the bottom part was really hot already. It was boiling, but I just added in 3 cups of cooler liquid. So it's gonna take a good 8 to 10 minutes for this pot to come up to pressure. We'll pressure cook for 3 minutes. I'll do a natural release for 3 minutes, and then we'll finish up our dish. All right, so the 3-minute pressure cook time went through, and the 3-minute natural release. Then I released the pressure. Now the pin has fallen, so I can open up the lid. This pot's going to be steamy, and I'm gonna warn you right now, when you open up the lid, you're gonna say, oh no, the pasta's not cooked. It is not cooked all the way. Do not worry about it. It will cook during the next step. Just let some of that steam go away. Make sure when you open up the lid that you open it away from you. Use the lid as like a shield here. And if you're making this recipe with the newer model of Ninja Foodi, the OL series with the smart lid, just make sure you use that handle to open up the lid after pressure cooking so that you don't, get bombarded with steam. Okay, now when you look in here, you're gonna see that the pasta is submerged in the liquid. It's a very liquidy pot right now, which is what we want. The pasta color is about like a golden golden yellow color because it's not fully cooked, so it hasn't lightened up all the way. That is by design. That is how the recipe is written because you don't want to overcook your noodles. Now, I've said before, I'll say it again, if you like softer noodles, increase your pressure cook time to 4 minutes. You should be good to go. Now, the first thing I want to do is get that piece of bacon out. So let me find it. You know, it's going to be all the way at the bottom, of course. And the noodles will seem a little bit clumpy right now, okay? That's, again, perfectly normal. They're going to finish cooking and separate and everything during the next step. All right, the roux. The roux is going to go in now, and it is going to thicken this liquid up a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the roux back on. Now you see during the time it's kind of solidified a little bit. That's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead and put it in. And roux is something that you can make up ahead of time and put in the freezer too. So it comes in handy when you're cooking things, especially pressure cooking, as a thickening agent. And, you know, if you wanted to make up a bunch of it and then separate it into portions and put it in the freezer, that's perfectly fine. All right, now I'm going to toss this around a little bit just so you can see the color and everything because it does not look very appealing right now, but don't worry about that, please. All right, next thing I want to do is go ahead and put on the sear saute. So I'm going to switch over to sear saute. I want to go down to the low setting, hit the start button. Now we can start putting in our cheeses. So what I have here is 4 ounces of an Italian blend cheese that just came out of the bag. It's pre-shredded. I'm gonna throw that in, get that mixed in. And then I have 4 ounces of Parmesan that I have finely shredded, which equaled about 2 cups. The volume will depend on your grater. So if you have a really fine grater, you might actually get a little bit more volume. If you have a thicker, coarser grater, you're gonna have lower volume. So go by ounces, 4 ounces of Parmesan cheese. And I recommend doing the shredding yourself instead of getting the bag kind because the bag kind is coated with something and it tends to become really gloppy and gooey in this kind of a dish. So I really recommend getting fresh Parmesan and then shredding it yourself. All right, to the topping that we're gonna add on, I'm gonna put about a half of a cup or so of the Parmesan cheese. So I'm just gonna put that there and set it over to the side. And I'm gonna put in the rest of the 4 ounces. And now let's go ahead and get this mixed up and get that cheese starting to melt. And we're gonna put in our peas. Now this is 12 ounces of frozen peas that I thawed in some water and then drained the water off. So they are thawed, but obviously they're not warmed through or anything. So we're gonna put those in so that they warm through and then add some cream to this and then put on our topping. All right. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and put in the cream and start to move this around to make sure that I get all the noodles separated. I have 2 cups of cream here, but I'm gonna start out with 1 cup. You can use a thinner liquid like a half and half or whole milk or something like that. That's perfectly fine. Or if you wanted to skip the cream altogether, you could certainly use more stock if you wanted. It would still be a thick sauce, it just wouldn't be a cream sauce. So I keep 2 cups of cream out and available because you never know exactly how much you're gonna need. Sometimes 1 cup will do the trick. Sometimes you're gonna need a little bit more than that. The idea is just to get it to the consistency that you like so that you have a nice, thick cream sauce that coats all of the pasta noodles. So I'm just looking to make sure all the pasta noodles are separated. And it looks like I could use a little bit more cream in here. It's mighty cheesy though, look at that. Oh my gosh, this looks amazing. All right, so I'm gonna add in a little bit more. And remember, we have to bake this too, because we're gonna bake a topping on top. So I do wanna make sure I have enough moisture in there that it doesn't dry out during that cooking process. So let me add about another half of a cup or so. All right, now that looks really, really good. It's nice and thick, it's really creamy. And if I was gonna serve it without the topping, I would be good to go right now, okay? So if you wanted to not put on the topping, just go ahead and you would be fine now at this consistency. But because I know that I'm gonna bake this now for about 10 to 15 minutes, I don't want it to be dry. You want it to really be moist and creamy, you know, when you go to bite into it. And the noodles still need to cook a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and add in the rest of this. So that means I used a total of 2 cups of the cream. And this will vary from test to test. Depends on your turkey and how much, you know, liquid that gives off. It depends on, you know, how long you saute it. If the mushrooms give off liquid, but then you saute them and reduce them down for more flavor, you're gonna have less liquid. You're gonna need more liquid at the end. Now you don't have to use 2 cups of cream either. You could split that up. So if you needed more liquid, you could add in 1 cup of cream and 1 cup of chicken stock. So what you add at the end is completely up to you. Go by looks and consistency. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do while I make up the topping, I'm gonna let this sit on low on the sear saute, and then once it has a time for all those flavors to kind of come together, I'm gonna taste it for seasonings. This is the time you wanna add salt, pepper, you know, maybe a kick of spice, you know, whatever you think it needs to be delicious for you. You wanna do that before you put the topping on. So let's get to the topping now. You could do this a ton of different ways. What I have here is 26 Ritz crackers, which is basically 2 of these little mini sleeves, crushed up, a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, and I'm gonna mix that up and I'm gonna add in a little bit of bacon grease and bacon bits. So I have, and these are homemade bacon bits, so I have 4 slices of thick cut bacon. It doesn't matter if it's applewood smoked or how, you know, hickory, whatever you like. Put those in. You could also use bacon bits if you just want to buy them at the store, that's fine, but I like making my own. And then I have some of the bacon fat that's left over, and I'm just gonna add that in too. That's gonna give a little bit of fat so that everything kind of crisps up on the top. I'm gonna add in just about a tablespoon. Give that a little mix. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. So if you don't want to use Ritz crackers, let's say you want to use breadcrumbs or another type of cracker, it equals 1 cup crushed, okay? That's the volume you want to be able to cover the top of the Ninja Foodi. All right, let's give this one more nice stir. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. Now, if you're using an Instant Pot to make this recipe and you want to put the topping on, transfer it to a casserole dish if you don't have the crisping lid and do it that way. Just, you know, broil or bake at a high temperature in the oven and get this crispy topping on top. All right, let me go ahead and taste this and see how the seasonings are. They're perfect. Oh my gosh, that is so good. All right, now, the most important thing whenever you're gonna add a topping onto a pasta dish, no matter what it is, that you're gonna end up using the crisping lid to crisp up, and it's pasta, especially pasta, make sure that the pasta is under the covering. Otherwise, that pasta cooks and gets a little bit hard and crispy, and it isn't always that pleasant. I mean, sometimes the crispy ends of lasagna is delicious, right? But if it was all across the top and it was, you know, baked and crunchy, probably wouldn't be that delicious. So that's why I make sure that I cover the pasta completely with just a thin layer of the topping here. And of course, you know, the topping, gosh, that can be made all kinds of ways. I mean, you don't have to add in the bacon. I just think turkey and bacon go so well together. You could, you know, use anything, any kind of cracker, any kind of, you know, frosted flakes, that would be good. Corn flakes, you know, anything you want. All right, so that looks good. Now we're gonna close our crisping lid. We're gonna bake at 375 degrees for 15 minutes, but I'm gonna check it every 5 minutes just to make sure the topping is crisping like I like it to, and then it's not burning in any places or anything like that. If it does seem to be getting too brown for you too quickly, but you want to bake it a little bit longer, lower your temperature, okay? All right, so it's been just about 5 minutes, so let's take a peek. Oh my goodness, it looks good. I think it can go just a little bit longer though. But it is getting dark in that one area. So you know what? I'm gonna back off the heat. I'm gonna take this down to 350 and let it go another 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just gonna kind of peek at it in 3 minutes and then see. Because you don't wanna burn the topping, but you also want it to be brown kind of evenly, okay? So what I'm gonna do real quick is just sort of spin the pot around, because you see this side's getting a little bit darker, and that sometimes happens when you're using the crisping lid. It even happens in ovens. There's hot spots sometimes. So I'm just gonna rotate it and then let it go the last 2 minutes, and then we'll be ready to serve it up. All right, that looks good. So we are all done. We can turn the Ninja Foodi off. Now, what I recommend you doing is just letting it sit for about 5 minutes. That's going to thicken everything up underneath, gonna allow the crust to kind of set, and then you can scoop it and serve it. Oh my gosh. This looks so good. All right, let's get it out. Oh, look at that creamy deliciousness. All right, so it's not very pretty to come out like that, but hey, you know what? Doesn't matter. I should also mention that this makes about 14 cups, so it goes up to the 14 cup line. So if you're using the smaller 5-quart Ninja Foodi, you need to cut the recipe in half. But I'll go over all that in the written post. All right, so here it goes. Let's give it a taste. It is creamy and cheesy, and these noodles are cooked perfectly, so they are not very soft. They have a little bit of a bite to them. Absolute perfection. Oh my gosh, the Parmesan cheese in there is so delicious. All right, let me try the topping. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. And of course, a piece of turkey. All right, here it goes. So good. Delicious. The bacon, I think, really is an extra special touch on top. I have not had that in previous turkey tetrazzinis that my mom has made. I don't think anyway. And oh my gosh, I think it's amazing. You could also put bacon in the dish, you know, like instead of doing that whole piece of bacon like I did and then remove it, you could cut up raw bacon and put it in there. It's gonna cook fine, but you know, it's not gonna render the fat, certainly not gonna be crispy, but you'll get those pieces of the actual bacon meat, you know, the actual pork. The fat will kind of melt away during the pressure cook time. So it can work for you. I prefer putting it in for flavor and removing it. That's just my personal preference. You can make this with chicken. You can even make this with seafood like I mentioned earlier in the video, and I will go over those things in my written post. So as always, make it yours, make it delicious, and keep it real.